The morning
I
light
can't hold it
filtered
in
through the tall
anymore.
windows of
It's
Adelaide
okay,
Cottage,
I'm here with you.
casting gentle shadows across the bedroom where Catherine, Princess of Wales, lay still beneath crisp white sheets. Her eyes were open, staring at the ceiling, tracing the patterns of the ornate molding that had become so familiar over the past months. William sat in the chair beside her bed, his hand wrapped around hers, his thumb making small circles on her palm. Neither of them spoke. They had learned that silence sometimes held more comfort than words ever could. It had been 9 months since the diagnosis. 9 months since their world had tilted on its axis, and everything they knew about their future had dissolved like morning mist. Catherine had been preparing for a routine engagement at a children's hospital when the first wave of dizziness hit her. She remembered gripping the edge of the bathroom sink, watching her reflection blur and sharpen, blur and sharpen. She had dismissed it then, chalking it up to exhaustion, to the relentless schedule that came with being a working royal, but the symptoms persisted. The fatigue that no amount of sleep could cure. The headaches that wrapped around her skull like a vice. The moments when her vision would tunnel and the world would seem to tilt beneath her feet. William had noticed before she admitted anything was wrong. He saw the way she steadied herself against doorframes. The way her smile would falter when she thought no one was looking. The way she touched her temple with trembling fingers during state dinners. The doctor's office had been cold. Catherine remembered that detail with crystalline clarity. She had worn her blue coat, the one William said brought out her eyes, and she had held his hand so tightly her knuckles turned white. The oncologist, a kind woman with silver hair and gentle eyes, had explained the scans with clinical precision. The tumor was aggressive. It was inoperable. Treatment could buy time, but it could not buy a cure. Catherine had asked only one question in that moment. How long? The doctor had hesitated, her eyes flickering to William before returning to Catherine. Perhaps a year, maybe 18 months if the treatment worked well. Catherine had nodded, squeezed William's hand once, and asked when they could start treatment. She did not cry. Not then. Not when the doctor left them alone in the small consultation room. Not when William pulled her into his arms and she felt his tears dampen her hair, she cried later. In the darkness of their bedroom, when the children were asleep and the palace was quiet, she cried for George, who at 11 was just beginning to understand the weight of his future. She cried for Charlotte, who at 9 still believed her mother could fix anything. She cried for Louis, who at 6 thought his mummy would always be there to tuck him in at night. And she cried for William, who loved her with a fierce devotion that had only deepened over their years together. They had decided together to keep the diagnosis private for as long as possible. Catherine wanted to continue her work, wanted to be present for her children, wanted to live as normally as she could for as long as she could. The palace released a statement about the Princess of Wales stepping back from some engagements due to health concerns, and the media speculated endlessly about what might be wrong. Catherine ignored it all. She focused on the small moments. The precious ordinary days that she now understood were anything but ordinary. William became her shadow and her strength. He rearranged his schedule to be with her for every treatment session, every doctor's appointment, every difficult night. He learned to read her silences, to know when she needed comfort and when she needed space. He became practiced at smiling for the children while his heart was breaking, at maintaining the facade of normalcy when everything felt like it was crumbling. The treatment was brutal. Catherine lost her lustrous brown hair, the hair that had been photographed 1,000,000 times, the hair that William loved to run his fingers through. She wore wigs to public engagements, scarves at home, and nothing at all in the privacy of their bedroom. William told her she was beautiful every single day. She did not always believe him, but she loved him for saying it. There were good days scattered among the difficult ones. Days when Catherine felt strong enough to play in the garden with the children, to walk the grounds of Windsor with William, to sit at her piano and play the melodies that had always brought her peace. On those days it was almost possible to forget, almost possible to pretend that life was as it had always been, that the future stretched out before them unlimited and bright, but the good days became fewer as the months passed. The treatment that had initially shown promise began to fail. New scans revealed what everyone had feared, but no one wanted to say aloud. The cancer was spreading. The doctors adjusted medications, tried new approaches, but Catherine could see the truth in their eyes. They were no longer fighting for cure. They were fighting for time. She made her last public appearance on a crisp autumn day at a charity event for seriously ill children. William stayed close to her side, his hand at the small of her back, steady and sure. Catherine smiled for the cameras, spoke with the families, held the hands of children who reminded her so painfully of her own. When it was over and they were back in the car, she leaned her head on William's shoulder and whispered, "That's enough now. I want to go home." Home became their sanctuary. Adelaide Cottage, smaller and more private than their other residences, became the place where they lived out their final chapter. The children were told the truth gently, carefully, with the help of counselors who specialized in helping families through impossible conversations. George, old enough to understand, went very quiet. Charlotte cried and asked if there was anything they could do. Louis climbed into his mother's lap and refused to leave her side for hours. Catherine spent her remaining strength on creating memories. She wrote letters to each of her children, one for every birthday until they turned 18, one for their weddings, one for when they became parents themselves. She recorded videos, her voice growing weaker with each passing week, telling them stories about her childhood, about meeting their father, about the day each of them was born. She wanted them to remember her voice, remember her laugh, remember that she had loved them with every fiber of her being. William watched his wife fade with a pain that had no words. The vibrant woman who had captured his heart at university, who had brought joy and warmth to the royal family, who had been his partner in every sense of the word, was slipping away. He held her hand through the long nights when pain made sleep impossible. He read to her from her favorite books. He played the songs she loved. He told her over and over that she was the best thing that had ever happened to him. December arrived with cold rain and gray skies. Catherine's condition deteriorated rapidly. The doctors moved equipment into Adelaide Cottage, transformed their bedroom into a place where she could be comfortable, where she could be surrounded by her family in her final days. William took leave from all official duties. The children were kept home from school. The world outside continued to turn, but inside Adelaide Cottage, time seemed to both speed up and stand still. Catherine's parents, Carol and Michael Middleton, became constant presences at Adelaide Cottage. Carol would sit beside her daughter's bed for hours, holding her hand, smoothing her brow, whispering memories of Catherine's childhood. She told stories of Christmas mornings and family holidays, of the little girl who had loved to organize tea parties and dress up as a princess long before she actually became one. Michael would read the newspaper to Catherine, keeping her connected to the world even as she withdrew from it. His voice breaking occasionally on words that suddenly held too much weight. Pippa visited daily, bringing fresh flowers from her garden and photographs of Catherine's nieces and nephews. She would lie beside her sister on the bed like they had as girls, talking about everything and nothing, making Catherine laugh even when laughing hurt. James came with stories and jokes, determined to keep his big sister smiling, refusing to let the mood become too heavy. Even as his own heart shattered, the palace staff who had worked closely with Catherine over the years asked permission to visit. They came quietly, respectfully, many of them in tears as they saw how much she had changed. Catherine greeted each one with grace, thanking them for their service, telling them how much their support had meant to her. She had always treated the staff with kindness and respect, remembering their names, asking about their families, and now they came to say goodbye to a woman they had genuinely loved. William's family visited too. King Charles came and sat beside Catherine's bed, taking her hand in his eyes red-rimmed behind his glasses. He told her what she had meant to the family, how she had brought light and warmth to the institution, how proud he was to have her as his daughter-in-law. Queen Camilla brought books and sat reading poetry aloud in her rich voice. Princess Anne arrived with her characteristic straightforwardness, telling Catherine she had been one of the finest royals in generations, someone who truly understood duty and service. Prince Harry flew in from California with Meghan. The brothers' complicated relationship was set aside in the face of something far more important. Harry sat with Catherine while William took a brief walk with their children, and she told him she hoped he and William could find their way back to each other. She told him that life was too short for grudges, that family was everything. Harry held her hand and promised he would try. His own grief over losing the sister-in-law who had once been so close to him mixing with his sorrow over his fractured relationship with William, but mostly it was just the five of them. William, Catherine, George, Charlotte, and Louis. They moved into Catherine's room, sleeping on mattresses on the floor, unwilling to be apart from her. They watched movies together, played quiet games, looked through photo albums. Catherine wanted them close, wanted to breathe in their presence, wanted to memorize the weight of Louis's head on her shoulder, the sound of Charlotte's laugh. The feeling of George's hand in hers. George tried to be brave, tried to be the strong eldest child, but sometimes his composure would crack and he would bury his face in his mother's side and sob. Catherine would stroke his hair and tell him it was okay to cry, that she cried too, that being sad was part of loving someone. She told him he would be an amazing king someday, not because of his title, but because of his heart. She told him to take care of his father, to watch over his siblings, but also to remember that he was still just a boy and it was okay to need help. Charlotte climbed into bed beside her mother every morning, curling into her side, careful of the tubes and wires, but desperate for closeness. She asked questions that Catherine answered with as much honesty as a 9-year-old could handle. Would it hurt? Would she be scared? Would she go to heaven? Catherine told her daughter that she wasn't scared anymore, that she had made peace with what was coming, that she believed they would see each other again someday. She told Charlotte to be brave, to be kind, to never let anyone dim her bright spirit. Louis, at 6, understood least but perhaps felt the most. He refused to leave his mother's side, bringing her his toys, his drawings, his favorite stuffed animals. He would pat her hand and tell her he loved her 100 times a day. Catherine would pull him close and breathe in his little boy smell, memorizing it, knowing these were the last times she would hold him. She told him stories, sang him songs, made him promise that he would always remember how much she loved him. William slept in the chair beside Catherine's bed when he slept at all. He woke at every sound, every shift in her breathing, terrified that he would miss a moment, terrified of the moment that was inevitably coming. During the day he held conversations with her that no one else heard, reminiscing about their years together, making promises about how he would raise their children, asking her questions about what she wanted for their future. Even though she would not be there to see it, they talked about their wedding day, about how nervous they had both been, about the kiss on the balcony that had sealed their commitment in front of the world. They talked about their first home on Anglesey, about the simplicity of those early days when they could pretend to be almost normal. They talked about the births of each of their children, about the overwhelming love and terror that came with bringing new life into the world. Catherine told William about her fears. She was afraid the children would forget her, that Louis especially was too young to hold on to memories. She was afraid of the pain her death would cause, afraid that William would drown in grief, afraid that George would carry too much burden too soon. William reassured her over and over, promising that they would keep her memory alive, that he would tell the children stories about her every day, that her love would continue to surround them even after she was gone. She also told him about her hopes. She hoped he would find happiness again someday, though the words broke both their hearts. She hoped he would let himself grieve but not get lost in the grief. She hoped he would lean on his family and friends, accept help when it was offered, show the children that it was okay to be vulnerable. She hoped he would continue the work they had started together, the causes they had championed, the difference they had tried to make in the world. William made his own promises. He promised to be both mother and father to their children as much as one person could be. He promised to make sure they knew their mother, to share stories and photos and videos, to visit the places Catherine had loved. He promised to live in a way that would make her proud, to find joy again even in the midst of sorrow, to honor her memory by embracing life rather than hiding from it. The doctors came and went, adjusting medications, monitoring vitals. their faces growing more somber with each visit. They spoke in hushed tones with William, preparing him for what was coming, for the signs he should watch for the decisions he might need to make. They were kind and professional, but William could see they were affected too. Catherine had that effect on people. She made them care that Christmas was approaching. Catherine was determined to make it to Christmas, to give her children one more holiday with their mother. She had helped plan it weeks earlier when she still had the strength, working with the staff to ensure that every tradition would be observed. Every gift would be purchased, every detail would be perfect. She wanted it to be a Christmas they would remember, a bright spot in what would otherwise be the darkest time of their lives. The decorations went up in Adelaide Cottage. A tree was placed in Catherine's room so she could see it from her bed. The children made paper chains and ornaments, bringing them to show their mother, asking if she liked them, seeking her approval even in this. Catherine smiled and praised every creation, her eyes drinking in the sight of her children's handiwork. Knowing these would be treasures William would keep forever. On Christmas Eve, the family gathered in Catherine's room. They were all dressed in matching pajamas, a Middleton family tradition that Catherine had insisted on maintaining. The children piled onto the bed carefully. William sat beside Catherine with his arm around her, and they watched a Christmas movie together on a small television that had been brought in. Catherine dozed off and on, but whenever she woke, she smiled at the sight of her family all together. They opened presents that night instead of Christmas morning, because no one knew if Catherine would be alert enough on Christmas Day. The children opened gifts with subdued excitement, showing each one to their mother, more interested in her reactions than in the presents themselves. Catherine had wrapped gifts for each of them weeks earlier, during a good day when she had been determined to complete this task. The packages were a bit messier than her usual precise wrapping, but they were labeled in her handwriting, and that made them precious beyond measure. William's gift to Catherine was a leather-bound journal. Inside, he had filled the first pages with letters to her, letters he had written over the past months, expressing everything he felt but couldn't always say aloud. He told her it was hers to keep beside her bed, and that he would keep writing in it even after she was gone, a way to continue their conversation, to share his thoughts with her. Catherine pressed the journal to her chest and whispered thank you. Her eyes bright with tears she no longer had the strength to shed fully. Catherine's gift to William was a pocket watch that had belonged to her grandfather. It was engraved with new words she had chosen, all my love, always, C. She told him she wanted him to have something he could carry every day, something that would remind him she was still with him. William fastened it to his waistcoat immediately, his hand going to it instinctively. And Catherine knew he would touch it 1,000 times in the days and years to come. Seeking comfort in its solid weight, Christmas morning arrived gray and cold. Catherine woke early, the pain managed enough by medication that she could be present, could smile, could squeeze hands and offer quiet words. The children brought their stockings to her room, pulling out small toys and treats, showing each item to their mother with forced cheer that broke the hearts of every adult present. Carol had prepared Christmas breakfast, the smells of cinnamon and bacon drifting through the cottage. The family gathered around Catherine's bed, plates balanced on laps, and tried to maintain the traditions that had always meant so much. Michael said grace, his voice cracking as he thanked God for the gift of family, for the blessing of having Catherine in their lives. No one mentioned that this would be their last Christmas together. After breakfast, the children performed a nativity play they had rehearsed with their grandmother. Louis was a shepherd, Charlotte was Mary, and George was a wise man. They had simple costumes and hand-drawn scenery, and they took their roles very seriously. Catherine watched with her hand pressed to her heart, smiling at their earnest performances, committing every moment to memory. When they finished, she clapped as hard as she could manage, and told them it was the best nativity play she had ever seen. The afternoon passed in a haze of quiet conversation and companionable silence. Catherine drifted in and out of sleep, but each time she woke, she found William beside her, found her children nearby, found her family surrounding her with love. It was enough. It was everything. The days after Christmas blurred together. Catherine's lucid moments became fewer. She slept more than she was awake, her breathing growing shallower, her body slowly shutting down. The medical team explained to William that it was time, that it would be soon, that he should gather anyone who wanted to say final goodbyes. William made the difficult calls. His voice was steady, mechanical almost, as he informed family members that they should come if they wanted to see Catherine one more time. They arrived in a stream of grief, saying their goodbyes, whispering words of love and thanks. Catherine heard some of it, her eyes fluttering open occasionally. A weak squeeze of a hand her only response. The children understood something was changing. They became quieter, more clingy, their eyes too old for their young faces. William sat them down and explained as gently as he could that Mummy was going to die very soon, probably in the next day or two. They cried, all of them, even George, who had been trying so hard to be strong. William held them and let them cry, let himself cry with them, knowing that these tears were necessary. That grief had to be felt to be survived. They asked if they could stay with her, if they could be there at the end. William's first instinct was to shield them, to spare them the trauma of watching their mother die. But Catherine, in one of her last clear moments, had made her wishes known. She wanted them there if they wanted to be there. She wanted her last view of this world to be the faces of the people she loved most. So William agreed, preparing himself to be strong enough for all of them. The final evening arrived on a Thursday in late December. The sun set early, casting long shadows through the windows of Catherine's room. The medical team checked her vitals, adjusted her medication to ensure she was comfortable, and told William quietly that it would be tonight. Her breathing had changed, they explained. The rattle in her chest indicated her body was shutting down. It would be hours now, not days. William gathered the children. He held George and Charlotte's hands, carried Louis on his hip, and led them into their mother's room. Carol and Michael were already there, sitting in chairs against the wall, their faces etched with a grief too deep for tears. Pippa and James stood near the window, holding each other. The room felt both crowded and intimate, filled with the people who had loved Catherine best. William helped the children onto the bed, arranging them carefully around Catherine. George sat by her shoulder, holding her hand. Charlotte curled against her side, her head on Catherine's chest. Louis nestled in the crook of her arm, his small hand patted her face. William sat behind them all, one arm around George, one hand on Charlotte's back, his own body providing support for them all. Catherine's eyes opened. They were unfocused at first, but then they found William's face, and something like a smile touched her lips. Her gaze moved to each child in turn, lingering, memorizing, loving. Her lips moved, forming words that had no sound, but William knew what she was saying. I love you. I love you. I love you. He leaned close, pressing his forehead to hers, and whispered back, I love you. We all love you. It's okay. You can rest now. We're going to be okay. I promise we're going to be okay. His voice broke on the last word, but he meant it. They would survive this somehow because they had to, because she would want them to. The hours passed slowly. Catherine's breathing grew more labored, then oddly peaceful. The children talked to her softly, telling her about their day, about what they wanted to do tomorrow, their young minds unable to fully comprehend that there would be no tomorrow with her. William kept his hand on her heart, feeling each beat, willing it to continue. Knowing it would not. Carol and Michael moved closer, standing at the foot of the bed. Pippa and James joined them, all of them crying silently, all of them bearing witness to this ending. A priest had come earlier offering prayers and blessings, but he had left the family alone for these final moments. This was too sacred, too personal for outsiders. Around midnight, Catherine's breathing changed again. The pauses between breaths grew longer. Each exhale seemed like it might be the last. The children had fallen asleep, exhausted by emotion, curled around their mother like they were trying to anchor her to earth through the sheer force of their need. William was grateful they were sleeping, grateful they would not remember these exact moments. William kept his eyes on Catherine's face, watching for any sign of pain or fear, but he saw only peace. Her features had relaxed, the lines of suffering that had marked her face for months fading away. She looked younger somehow, like the girl he had fallen in love with all those years ago at university, full of light and possibility. He found himself talking to her, whispering a stream of memories and promises. He reminded her of their first kiss, of how nervous he had been, of how she had laughed at him. He told her about the moment he knew he wanted to marry her, watching her at a charity event, seeing the way she lit up while talking to sick children. He recounted the births of each of their babies, the terror and wonder of those moments, how she had been so strong and so scared all at once. He promised again that he would take care of their children, that he would make sure they knew her, that her legacy would live on through them and through him. He promised to continue their work, to champion the causes she cared about, to make a difference in her name. He promised to find Joy again someday because she would want that for him. Even though Joy felt impossible in this moment. And then, so quietly that William almost missed it, Catherine took a breath and did not take another. The silence that followed was profound. William waited, counting seconds, willing another breath to come, but none did. Her heart beat once more under his hand, then stilled. For a long moment no one moved. The room held its breath along with them, suspended in the space between life and death. Then Carol let out a soft sob, and the spell was broken. Michael wrapped his arms around his wife, both of them trembling with grief. Pippa and James clung to each other, tears streaming down their faces. William sat frozen, his hand still on Catherine's chest, unable to accept what his mind knew to be true. She was gone. His Catherine. His wife. His best friend. The love of his life. The mother of his children. Gone. He became aware of the sleeping children around him, their warm little bodies pressed against their mother's cooling one. He needed to wake them, needed to tell them, but he could not bring himself to shatter the peace of their sleep. Let them have a few more moments of innocence, a few more moments before their world changed forever. The medical staff entered quietly, having been waiting just outside. They checked for vital signs, pronounced the time of death with somber formality, and then stepped back, giving the family space. William was grateful for their discretion, for the way they treated Catherine with dignity even now, covering her gently with a blanket, leaving the family to say their final goodbyes. William finally, gently, woke the children. George stirred first, his eyes opening, immediately seeking his mother's face. William watched the realization dawn, watched his son's face crumble as he understood that she was gone. Charlotte woke next, her hand going to her mother's still chest, her eyes filling with tears as she looked to her father for confirmation. Louis was the last to wake, confused and frightened, not understanding why everyone was crying. William gathered them to him, pulling them away from Catherine's body, holding them as they broke apart. George cried silently, his thin shoulders shaking. Charlotte sobbed into William's chest, her grief raw and unfiltered. Louis wailed, the sound of a child who knew something terrible had happened but could not comprehend what. William held them all, rocking them, murmuring words of comfort that felt hollow, but were all he had to offer. Carol and Michael came forward, taking the children one by one, holding them, adding their tears to the flood. Pippa knelt beside the bed, taking her sister's hand one last time, whispering goodbyes and promises. James stood with his head bowed, his fists clenched at his sides, looking like he wanted to fight something, anything. But there was no enemy to battle here. When the children were settled with their grandparents and aunt and uncle, William returned to Catherine's side. He sat on the edge of the bed and took her hand, still warm but growing cooler. He studied her face, trying to memorize every detail, knowing that from this moment forward she would only exist in memories and photographs. He leaned down and kissed her forehead, her cheeks, her lips one last time. "Thank you," he whispered. "Thank you for choosing me. Thank you for the life we built together. Thank you for our children. Thank you for every moment, every laugh, every tear, every ordinary day that I didn't appreciate enough. I will love you for the rest of my life. I will miss you every single day. Until we meet again, my darling." The next hours were a blur of necessary tasks. Calls had to be made. The palace had to be notified. Arrangements had to be set in motion. William moved through it all like a sleepwalker, his mind unable to fully process what had happened, his body operating on autopilot. The children were given sedatives to help them sleep, tucked into beds in another room while the medical team did what needed to be done with Catherine's body. The palace released a statement just before dawn. It was brief and dignified, announcing that Catherine, Princess of Wales, had passed away peacefully at Adelaide Cottage surrounded by her family after a courageous battle with cancer. The statement asked for privacy for the royal family during this time of grief. Within minutes, the news had spread around the world. The outpouring of grief was immediate and overwhelming. Flowers began arriving at the palace gates, at Kensington Palace, at Windsor Castle. Thousands upon thousands of bouquets, along with cards and letters and photographs. People stood in the rain to pay their respects, many of them crying openly, mourning a woman they had never met but had felt they knew. Catherine had touched people with her warmth, her genuine kindness, her dedication to service. Now they mourned her as a nation mourns a beloved daughter. World leaders sent condolences. The Prime Minister gave a statement praising Catherine's work and character. Foreign royals expressed their sorrow. Social media was flooded with tributes, memories, photographs spanning Catherine's years as a royal. The world had lost a princess, but more than that, it had lost a force for good. A woman who had used her position to make a difference. William could not look at any of it. He stayed at Adelaide Cottage with his children, cocooned in grief, moving through the days like a ghost. King Charles came and sat with his son, both of them silent in their shared pain. Charles had lost his mother just a few years before, and now William had lost his wife. The grief was different but no less profound. The children coped in different ways. George became very quiet, spending hours alone in his room, writing in a journal his mother had given him. When William checked on him, he found pages filled with memories of Catherine, stories George was recording so he would not forget. William sat beside his son and they wrote together, building a record of the woman they had both loved. Charlotte threw herself into activity, helping plan the funeral, choosing flowers, picking music, needing to feel useful, needing to do something. She was so much like her mother in that way, William realized. Catherine had always found purpose in action, in service, in doing. William let Charlotte help, knowing she needed this. Knowing her mother would have been proud of her strength. Louis regressed, wanting to be held constantly, asking for his mummy, not understanding why she did not come when he called. William held him for hours, rocking him, singing the lullabies Catherine used to sing, trying to be both mother and father to a little boy who had lost the center of his world. It broke William's heart 1,000 times a day. But he did it because he had promised Catherine he would. The funeral was planned with military precision. A state occasion befitting a Princess of Wales, but within the formal structure William insisted on personal touches. The flowers would be from Catherine's favorite gardens. The music would include pieces she loved. The eulogies would be personal, not just formal tributes. This was goodbye to Catherine the woman. Not just Catherine the princess. The night before the funeral, William sat alone in the chapel where Catherine's coffin lay in state. He had asked for time alone with her, and the staff had quietly withdrawn, leaving him in the candlelit space with his wife one last time. He sat in the front pew and talked to her, telling her about the children, about the funeral plans, about how much he missed her. The silence was his only answer, but somehow it felt less empty than he had feared. The morning of the funeral was cold and clear. William dressed in his uniform, his hands shaking as he fastened the buttons. The children wore black, looking far too solemn for their ages. George would walk in the procession, William had decided after much agonizing. Charlotte and Louis would ride in a car. It was the same arrangement that had been used for his mother's funeral all those years ago, and William hated the symmetry of it, hated that his children had to endure this pain. The funeral procession wound through London, past hundreds of thousands of people who had lined the streets to say goodbye. William walked behind Catherine's coffin, his eyes straight ahead, his jaw tight, refusing to break down in public. George walked beside him, pale but steady, his hand occasionally reaching for his father's. Behind them came the rest of the family, a long line of grief-stricken relatives united in sorrow. Westminster Abbey was packed with dignitaries. Royals from around the world, representatives from the charities Catherine had supported, and ordinary people who had won the lottery for seats. But as William entered, he saw only the coffin draped in the royal standard, topped with white roses that had been Catherine's favorite. That was his wife in there, the mother of his children, the woman who had stood beside him through everything. The service was beautiful and heartbreaking. The hymns were sung with voices that cracked with emotion. The prayers were offered with genuine feeling. But it was the eulogies that undid everyone. Pippa spoke first, her voice breaking as she shared memories of her big sister, of the girl who had always looked after her, who had been her best friend before she was a princess. She told funny stories that made people laugh through their tears, and she ended by promising Catherine that she would watch over her children, would make sure they knew how loved they were. William spoke last. He stood at the lectern, looking out at the sea of faces, and for a moment he could not speak. Then he looked at his children in the front row, at George sitting so straight, at Charlotte clutching Louis's hand, and he found his voice. He spoke from the heart, no prepared speech, just words that tumbled out in a stream of love and grief and gratitude. He told them about their wedding day, about how beautiful she had looked, about how he had been so nervous he could barely speak his vows. He told them about becoming parents, about how natural Catherine had been with their babies, how she had loved them with a fierceness that had taken his breath away. He told them about her work, her dedication to early childhood development, to mental health, to the arts, to all the causes she had championed. And then he spoke directly to his children, his voice breaking. "George, Charlotte, Louis, your mother was the most incredible person I have ever known. She loved you more than life itself. Every decision she made, every moment of her life was shaped by her love for you. She was so proud of each of you. She wanted you to know that even though she is not here, her love surrounds you always. She will be with you in the morning sunshine, in the flowers that bloom, in the laughter you share. She lives on in you, in the kindness you show, in the compassion you extend, in the joy you find. Live for her. Love for her. Make her proud." There was not a dry eye in the abbey. William returned to his seat, and George reached for his hand, squeezing tightly. Charlotte was crying silently, and Louis had climbed into his Aunt Pippa's lap, seeking comfort. The service concluded with Catherine's coffin being carried out, and William followed it one last time, leading his children out into the cold December air. The burial was private, just family at Windsor. Catherine was laid to rest in a quiet corner of the grounds, beneath an oak tree she had loved. William held his children as they each placed a rose on the coffin. George's hand lingered, as if he could not quite bear to let go. Charlotte kissed her fingers and touched the wood gently. Louis simply stared, too young to understand the finality of this goodbye. As the coffin was lowered into the ground, William felt something crack open inside him, a grief so profound he thought it might swallow him whole. But he stood straight, held his children close, and watched as the earth claimed the physical body of the woman he loved. Her spirit, he knew, lived on in other ways, in their children, in their memories, in the difference she had made in the world.
Thanks for watching.